Good news, everyone. MG is back. Well, I say good news. What I mean is just news. They're back, but whether it's good news, that's another issue. What they're back with is this, the MG3, a family hatchback about the same size as a Ford Fiesta or Volkswagen Polo. And it's the company's second product since it was bought by a Chinese car maker back in 2005. Some of you will look at this and think, great, that's a blast from the past. The rest of you, the sane majority, will look at it and think that's a recipe for automotive disaster. What you've got here is an old British car manufacturer brought back from the dead by a Chinese car maker. The less said about them, the better. And it's dirt cheap. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let me tell you. Let's break it all down. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Starting with the good. Number one, the price. This thing is mad cheap. $8,399 it starts from. Sure, there are cheaper cars, but this size, you're gonna be looking long and hard. Plus, it's got a low insurance group, so it might be one for the kids. Number two, this thing makes a great first impression. Put aside all your reservations about the brand for a second and just take it in. The front's kind of like a cross between a Clio and a Polo. The side's got a certain Skoda Fabia vibe to it. And the back, that's got a hint of Fiat Punto. Call it copying, call it paying homage. I call it like I see it. And I'm seeing a good looking supermini. Number three, the MG3 is really practical. The boot's not the biggest in the world, but it's a good shape and easy to load. Plus, check this out, there's loads of space in the back. These rear doors open to almost 90 degrees, so it's easy to just jump right in. And the front seat's adjusted for me. I'm about 6 foot, and I've still got loads of legroom and loads of headroom. So comfy. Up front, it's a similar story. It's really comfortable in here. There's a really good driving position. The seats have got a decent amount of adjustability, and although the steering only adjusts for height and not reach, that's something I can live with. The final good point, and this is probably the most important, is that this thing drives surprisingly well. There's bad within the good, so the steering is a little bit vague around the dead center. You have to kind of put really big inputs in before it registers. And it's a little bit too firm around town. You kind of have to arm wrestle it to do anything. Plus the suspension is a little bit too firm. It kind of crashes over potholes and going over speed bumps. Well, let's just say that's not enjoyable. But apart from that, it's really entertaining. Grip, balance, poise, it's got none of those things. No, I'm joking, it's actually really good fun. Kind of reminiscent of a hot hatch. So there's plenty of good about the MG3, but there's also a fair amount of bad. Those looks I talked about earlier, well, they can easily be ruined. MG is obviously pitting this car against the Citroën DS3 and the Fiat 500, both of which have excellent options for customization. This one has go faster stripes on the bonnet and on the roof, which you'd just about tolerate if it was a Dodge Viper or you were 12 years old. But here, really? Also bad, the engine. You only get one choice, that's a 1.5 litre petrol. MG reckon it will do 50 miles per gallon and 136 grams per kilometre of CO2. And that's not good at all. Even larger cars like the Ford Focus get better economy and lower CO2 emissions. In terms of performance, well, what performance? On paper it's okay, 0 to 60 in just over 10 seconds, but you've really got to rev the knackers off it to go anywhere because there's no torque whatsoever down low in the rev range. If you care about performance, you're not going to care much for this. Also bad is the fact that this car is a little bit cheap. Not cheap and nasty, just kind of budget. Some of the plastics, in fact all the plastics in here, are just kind of scratchy. Some of the buttons and switchgear feel a little bit Fisher Price. You hop out of one of these and into a Ford Fiesta, and it kind of feels like you're jumping into a Maybach. The final bad point is this, the MG badge. Now before all you MG fanboys declare jihad on your keyboards, I'm not the enemy. The enemy is depreciation. See, if people aren't going to want this car when it's shiny and new for whatever reason, imagine how they're going to feel about it when it's been around the block a few times. After about 3 years, this is likely to lose about 30% of its value. And when you come to sell it, you might be in for a big shock. So we've seen the good, we've seen the bad, and now we must discuss the ugly. All the factors that make this car truly awful. But actually, there's nothing awful about it. Like most cars, it has its positives and its negatives. That's as far as it goes. The MG3 is surprisingly capable with a great design, comfortable cabin, and good handling. Sure, its interior and its performance may leave something to be desired, but if you love the brand, love the styling, and more importantly, you're tempted by its low price tag, then it represents excellent value for money.